Hello and welcome to the Visionary Chronicles. Appreciate you being with me today. We have the series, which we started last week on Chronicle number 1, Becoming a Visionary Brand. So it's a 6-part series, and today is Chronicle number 2, which I call The Architecture of Disruption. So this series comes off my book. It's the previous book. I just released The Visionary Leader. This was my first best-selling book, which I released a couple years ago, which is The Visionary Brand, the success formula behind the world's most visionary brands. So we're starting this new business leadership series. We had great success with the last one, Becoming a Visionary. Now we've got Becoming a Visionary Brand with content taken from my best-selling book, The Visionary Brand. And this is Chronicle number 2. So if you haven't listened to Chronicle number 1, highly encourage you to listen or watch. I've got both video as well as audio of the Chronicle number 1. And also I wanted to make note before I forgot is that we just recently released also to great success, fortunately, and we appreciate those that did purchase the audiobook. So we released that about a month and a half or so ago across all audiobook channels. So you can now purchase the audiobook. For those that like cruising in the car, we had a lot of requests for the audiobook on the Visionary Brand and the Visionary Leader, so both of those are actually done. So today, this is Chronicle number 2, and I call it The Architecture of Disruption. And again, this is the series Becoming a Visionary Brand from my earlier released book, The Visionary Brand, the success formula behind the world's most visionary brands. And the intro on this one is the paradox of the pedestal, I call it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of story on this one, how I came up with the paradox of the pedestal and actually what it means. And so welcome back to the Visionary Chronicles. Again, in our last session, Chronicle number 1, I'd like to recap a little bit. We defined what a visionary brand looks like from 30,000 feet. But today we're going to bring it down to ground level, deal with the most dangerous, what I call the most dangerous moment in the life of really any brand is the moment of success. Whether that be a one-hit wonder, whether that be multiple products, service, whatever you may be selling, you have that moment of success. What do I do? Do I stay frozen? Do I continue to innovate? What do I do? So there's this psychological trap that happens when a brand finally reaches the top of its industry. It's what I call this pedestal paradox. And what I mean by this is when you're on the pedestal, really your natural instinct is to stand still so you don't fall off, which is an unusual way to think about it. You've worked so hard to get up on the pedestal. Now you're protecting your environment on top of the pedestal. You begin to build walls. You start protecting your margins, defending your patents, and repeating the same process that got you there. But interestingly enough, in a world that is shifting literally under our feet second by second, standing still is the most violent act you can commit against your own future. Your future success is what I'm talking about. When you hear of one-hit wonders, you talk about products where they had a great invention like Sony and the Walkman. Visionary brands like Apple, Nike, Oakley didn't stay icons because they protected their original products. They stayed icons because they were the first ones to literally set fire to them. Let me say that again. Visionary brands like Apple, Nike, and Oakley didn't stay icons because they protected their original products. They stayed icons because they were the first ones to set fire to them. They realized that the architecture of a legacy isn't built in stone, it's built of fluid. It's fluidity that can change second to second, minute to minute, day to day. So today we're going to learn to stop being a manager of the past and start being an architecture of disruption. So we're going to look back at internal engines that allow you to stay stable in your purpose while being radical in your tactics and how you achieve success, maintain success, and grow within that platform. So, what I'm betting is that by the end of this episode, you'll be able to, number one, define the relationship between a stable narrative engine and a disruptive product strategy. Number two, you're going to identify sacred cows within your organization that inhibit architectural evolution. Number three is you're going to apply what I call the liquid leadership framework to maintain vision during technical pivots, which everybody has. I frequently talk about this switchback leadership. Achieving success is never a point A to point B. There's a lot of intermediary barriers along the way you have to face and overcome. So the ability for you to be liquid in your leadership is critical. And number four is analyze how self-cannibalization strengthens a brand long-term market position. Number five, you're going to evaluate the momentum trap and its role in collapse of legacy brands. And number six, finally, constructing some homework. What I call this 90-day self-disruption plan for your primary product or service. So to help you kind of master this transition from what I call this defensive crouch to a visionary leadership leap, I've set out 6 critical milestones for today's deep dive into the Visionary Chronicles podcast in our session, Becoming a Visionary Brand. Chronicle number 2, the architecture of disruption. Number 1 is the discomfort of evolution. Not the comfort of evolution, the discomfort, because it does require risk. And very few people are comfortable with risk. So in our foundational sessions we talked about, we established that a brand is a living architecture. But even the strongest buildings can become what I call these tombs if they're not allowed to breathe and evolve. The paradox of success is that the walls you build to protect your achievements, your success, often become the very barriers that prevent your next breakthrough, your next disruption. I'm not talking about a product's evolving, incremental improvements. That doesn't count here. We don't classify that as innovation, anything to do with visionary leadership. Visionary leadership requires a fundamental shift in mindset. And I want you to remember this. And write this down if you can. If not, you're driving, listening to this, remember it. Seeing success not as a destination to be guarded, but as a temporary platform for the next step. Jim Gennard was the epitome of this. Jim never worried about the competition because he knew everybody was following us on our technology, our products, whatever it may be, the breakthroughs that we had with Oakley. So when we look at the graveyard of formerly great companies, the cause of death is rarely a lack of resources. There's always great employees out there. There's always people that can help your company. It's almost always an abundance of comfort. We're comfortable in this product. And notice when I mention product, it's singular, right? It's not a multiplier. But to be a visionary is to embrace the permanent state of beta, where the final version of your brand really never actually exists. You're constantly evolving. So it's a discomfort of evolution. So the key points to remember here are the price of evolution. And a couple points I'll mention here are defensive walls versus open architecture. And what that means is traditional leaders build walls to protect success. Visionary leaders build systems designed for constant evolution, especially in the age of AI that we're in today. Number 2 is the ego barrier. And we've all been there in rooms where a person's ego, a brand's ego, well, we're number 1 for a reason, not for long. The hardest thing to disrupt is your own ego and the belief that your current way is the only way. So overcoming your ego to move forward in your brand and the evolution of it is probably one of the hardest barriers you face. We face that all the time, and we have these whiteboard meetings with our one-on-ones at Liquid Mind with the brand leaders. Is whether it's an ego on the person or the ego of the brand itself, we find both being disruptive to being disruptive. And the next is planned discomfort. Discomfort is not a side effect of growth, it's the price of it. And again, I'll say planned discomfort. Plan to be discomforted when you're trying to disrupt your industry. Discomfort's not a side effect of growth, it's the price of it. The next is stagnation as risk. Protecting the status quo is not the safe play. It's the most dangerous risk a leader can take. So those are 4 points on the price of evolution. The second point is the self-disruption imperative. And what this is the self-disruption imperative is the core, what I call this core survival mechanism of a visionary brand. In an era of rapid, daily, hourly, minute, second, technological and cultural shifts, don't lose sight of the cultural shifts by looking at only technological risks. The greatest risk isn't failure, it's staying exactly where you are while the world moves on from you. By intentionally breaking your own models before someone else does, you maintain control of the industry's tempo. And we always had this with the brands I've been with, whether it be Oakley, Adidas. We always looked at what's the next great evolution of our brand and disruptive product or technology we can introduce to it to keep us ahead of the industry through our tempo. Not playing to the music of others, but having us lead the concert, having us be the orchestrator of where our industry is going. And when you look at this, this requires what I call a day zero mentality every single morning. And this is another thing I want you to remember as a leader in your industry. You must wake up and ask yourself, if a competitor were to start today with no legacy costs, no baggage, and no ego, how would they destroy me and my brand? Again, I'll say, the day zero mentality is waking up every morning and asking, if a competitor were to start today with no legacy costs, no baggage, and no ego, how would they destroy me? And that's possible today, by the way. When you have that answer, your job is to do it to yourself first. Destroy yourself first, and then move on to your next product and evolve in your industry. And take the leadership position and always maintain it. So some key points on the vulnerability, what I call this vulnerability of success and this self-destructive imperative, is the target is on your back once you are a leader, and we all know that. When you're at the top, you're no longer the disruptor. You are the target for every hungry newcomer. And I call it the elephant versus the rabbit. I always love working with these small entrepreneurial brands because the leaders will say, how do we compete against the Nike, against an Adidas? And I said, you guys are the rabbit. And they would always ask, oh, what do you mean by that? We don't have the money. We don't have the marketing spend. We don't have the resources like they do. Yeah, but you can make a move. Every move a large brand makes is literally like moving a battleship out in the ocean. It takes them forever, or even a freight liner. Let's put it that better, even a better analogy. They can't just spin on a dime. You're a speedboat. You may be smaller, but you're faster and you can maneuver around these big brands and these big boats. The second is the defensive crouch. I see this too often. I call it the head in the sand, the ostrich syndrome. Hey, gee, I hope things turn around by the time I lift my head out of the sand. Traditional brands try to sustain what they have through protectionism, which leads to terminal rigidity in their brand, their company, and resources. Number 3 is setting the tempo. Think of a concert, right? You want to be the lead in the concert. You want to be the conductor, not the orchestra. So set the tempo for your industry and your product category, and you'll continue to lead. This is proactive disruption, which allows you to choose the timing of change, forcing your competitors to spend their energy reacting to you. That's what we had continually at Oakley. Every single retailer that we would go into would want to know what the next evolution of not Oakley, but the product category itself. We had the tempo. We were the conductor. And number 4 is market obsolescence. If your products aren't becoming obsolete because of your own innovations, they will become obsolete because of someone else's. This is so important for you to remember. Let me say it again. Market obsolescence. If your products aren't becoming obsolete because of your own innovations, they will become obsolete because of someone else's. That's critical to your long-term success. Number 3 is what I call the sacred cow audit. And every organization I've been with, worked with at Liquid Mind, every organization accumulates what I call these sacred cows. And what it is, it's outdated habits, products, or beliefs that were once responsible for success, but they're now anchors holding the brand back. Architecting for disruption requires an aggressive, honest assessment of what no longer serves the future vision of your brand, company, product, or service. This process is about making room for the new by having the courage to retire the good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's good. But there hasn't been a single brand at the pinnacle of their success that anybody says, oh, they're good. They're awesome. They're great. When you look at these words that Steve Jobs used to use with Apple, that making a dent in the universe, different acronyms that he would use, he never used the word good. That literally was not good enough for Steve, and why he created all these insane inventions, and he would classify them as insanely great. And we must distinguish between legacy and history. And when I put this question up on the board, a lot of people can't answer it. They'll just say, well, legacy and history are kind of the same thing. They're not. History is what we've done. Legacy is the impact we continue to make. To protect your legacy, you might have to set fire to your history. That's an interesting analogy, isn't it? Most people don't think of it that way. You must distinguish between legacy and history. History is what we've done. Legacy is the impact we continue to make in our industry, product, or service. To protect your legacy, you might have to set fire to your history. Always remember that. And some key points here on this, point number 3, identifying the anchors. So the first is the day one question. Make sure that you do this. Ask yourself, if I was starting a company today, would I include this product or process in our portfolio? If not, get rid of it. Number 2 is fearless cannibalization. This one's awesome. And the tailor-made case study I profiled in the Visionary brand book proves that making your own products obsolete is a strategic win compared to letting a competitor do it. You never want a competitor to out-innovate you. You want to out-innovate yourself. And by the way, you may get resistance from the standpoint of the sales team saying this product isn't going to sell. It doesn't have a big enough TAM or a big enough SAM for it to be successful. But when you look at it, what you're trying to do is lead your industry from a technological perspective, if that's the case. It may not be the best seller, but what it allows you to do is set a precedence for your innovation and build a product pipeline wave that you can draw down from over generations. That is how you build a successful company. Number 3 is gap closure. A cycle of continuous self-replacement leaves no market gaps for competitors to find a foothold in your industry. Make sure that you have gaps that you close wherever you see one, whether it be a pricing model, product model, tiers, demographics that you need to serve that you're not serving. Make sure that your competitors have no gaps to fill in your product or your services. Whatever it may be, ensure that you're closing up those gaps so you're not vulnerable to your competitors. Number 4 is auditing belief systems. The most dangerous sacred cows are the invisible ones, the unspoken assumptions about what your customers want. So make sure that you're auditing those belief systems to reality. Number 4 is liquid leadership in the crisis of momentum, I call it. In this one, liquid leadership is the ability to maintain a fixed purpose while remaining completely flexible in your methods. Isn't that a beautiful way to lead? Is that you've been around leaders that are just completely inflexible and not dealing with reality. You can pivot from what you're looking at doing over the next year, but you can't lose sight of your destination point. So it's the ability to maintain a fixed purpose or remaining completely flexible in your methods. Most organizations, by the way, are crushed by their own momentum. They become so focused on how they work that they forget why they exist. Make sure you're asking that question continually. Why do we exist for our customer? Breaking this momentum trap is essential for staying agile during times of crisis or a market pivot. Success creates a protectionist crouch where you stop taking risks when you should be taking risks because you have too much to lose as a company or brand. Liquid leaders realize the only way to protect what they have is to keep moving forward. Momentum is everything. So some key points here to remember is that breaking the momentum trap, number 1 is the innovation trap. Avoid spending years protecting a single win. I always talk about that one-hit wonder. Use the capital from that win to fund your next disruption immediately. The most ballsy approach I've ever seen is where Apple, when Steve was there, not today, is that his strategy is that at the top of the supply and demand curve, when you keep your product in that life cycle curve until it tips over on the backside to late adopters, Steve kept it up there as long as it hit the pinnacle of success, and then he would pull it because he knew that he had something better that early adopters wanted at a higher price point and a better margin. And he would make that a previous generation to justify brand equity. And the next is purpose over process. Anchor your leadership in why you exist. Remember why you exist, the vision of what you have, not how you deliver, which is the tactics. Number 3 is rapid adaptation. Find ways to adapt products or services that make your community, your demographic, your targeting more effective, more efficient. When market disruption occurs, your tactics must be fluid enough to change instantly while your vision remains your North Star. And the last point here is detachment. Is practice the art of strategic detachment from your current business model. Detach yourself. Get out of the status quo and move on to something different that's going to break this momentum trap for you as a brand. It's critical to your long-term success. And number 5 is what I call powering this narrative engine. The narrative engine is the heart of your brand architecture, providing the fuel, I call it, the gas, the horsepower, and the direction for all your disruptive actions. Without a strong narrative, disruption is just chaotic change that confuses both your team and your customer. And I say this because unless you understand why you exist, why you're making these changes, how it adapts to the marketplace, how it's going to allow your customer and demographic, and by the way, your retailers customers to be more effective and more efficient, and in line with the brand innovation, how are you going to sell it? So without a strong narrative, again, disruption is just chaotic change that confuses your team and your customers. And you don't want that. You want it to be a natural transition where people on the early adopter curve keep and stay there. That's where your money is. That's where your margin is. So the more you have in the pipeline to sell the products along that supply and demand curve, getting rid of products earlier, making them a previous generation, allowing the late adopters to get into your brand without apologizing for brand equity degrading, you keep everything on the front end for early adopters. It's a powerful engine that ensures that every ship, no matter how radical, feels like a logical progression towards a greater goal for your company. So your narrative is the soul of the brand. Again, I'll say your narrative is the soul of your brand. It's what keeps your best talent from leaving when you pivot. It's what keeps your customers loyal when your products change. So the anticipation, the vision, the future casting, all the things that I talk about are critical to the narrative engine of your brand and where you're taking it and interpreting that so people have a passion around it. The key points here are what I call the stabilizing force. One is fixed vision and fluid tactics. Your narrative is the anchor that allows your methods to be experimental and bold for those who want to be a part of your company or your brand or your product. Number two is the heart of architecture. Really, the narrative engine sits at the center, the pinnacle of where you are as a brand, is the hub for everything else that you do, ensuring alignment between your value ecosystem and your innovation spiral we talked about last week. Product and culture. Recruiting culture carriers. A clear narrative converts employees from cultural tourists into cultural carriers, going out to your community, professing how much they love the brand, they embrace what the brand is doing, and talking to your community. They make visionary decisions independent of anybody else, but you want these culture carriers as a part of your brand. That's why I go back to a conversation I had earlier where I mentioned during COVID or during this transition phase after COVID, they had so many people that were walking away from supposed brands. But I can tell you what they were walking away from was cultures. And when you have these culture carriers, the cultural tourists stay away. So you want to make sure that you're going and building these culture carriers, who really are employees with a passion around your vision for the brand. And the next is belief systems. A narrative engine focuses really on what you believe, not just what you build. So all of these points, these 5 points, and number 6, the conclusion is how do we bring it all together? It's building the legacy of disruption, what I call the architecture of disruption. Visionary brands strive to be anti-fragile. They don't want to mix with the status quo. They're perfectly fine in their comfort zone. A state where organization actually grows stronger when exposed to stretch volatility and disruption. So by combining a disruptive architecture, I call it, with a stabilizing narrative engine, you create a brand that doesn't just survive the future, it defines it. How cool is that? Wouldn't you rather be with a brand that's defining the future rather than just stabilizing it? So, as we wrap up this episode of Architecture of Disruption in this series of Becoming a Visionary Brand, that ask yourself these questions. And I really want you to think about these as you move forward with your brand or your company as a leader. Are you building momentum to the past or a bridge to the future? That's number one. A monument is, think about it this way. A monument is fixed, heavy, and eventually crumbles under the weight of time. A bridge is dynamic. It's supportive and designed to facilitate movement of people. So be a bridge to the future, not a monument to the past. So your leadership over the next 90 days will dictate which one your brand becomes. If you choose the path of least resistance, the path of protectionism, you're effectively signing the brand's expiration date. It's just a matter of if, but when. If you choose the path of architected disruption, I call it, you're claiming a stake in the next decade of your industry. So let me give you some final points here on this episode that you really need to think about. And I call it building for the decade. Number one is gaining strength from shock. Anti-fragile brands use market shifts as catalysts for growth rather than threats to their survival. Think of what you did during I'm not saying a disruptive innovation, but just a disruption to your industry. Did you take off and hide? Or did you find it as an opportunity to attack your competition, even in the face of disruption? It's a catalyst for growth, gaining strength from shock. Others flee, you innovate. Number two is immediate application. Go back to your office and perform a sacred cow audit on your top performing product today. Does it still work? Does it do what it was supposed to do? Was it the original vision? Is it no longer a vision for our company? Does it make sense to continue to have these things in our day-to-day as a brand and company? The next is institutionalizing disruption. Make it part of your day-to-day. Make self-disruption a core KPI. How are you doing? Track how often you are challenging your own status quo and asking these questions. And the final thought is disruption is really a choice. If you choose it for yourself, the market will eventually choose it for you. So control your destiny. I talk about this all the time. In controlling your own destiny versus have somebody else control it for you, why would you choose the latter? So to complete the episode toolkit, I've developed a couple resources for you. And I always do this in our courses. And I've developed 3 primary resources referenced in your script. These are designed to be practical, high-impact documents you can immediately apply to your business, product, or service. And their episode resources are, number 1, the Sacred Cow Audit Checklist. And that is a diagnostic tool to identify architectural anchors that you have that you need to get rid of. Number 2 is the Liquid Leadership Framework that I talked about, the one-page guide to tactical flexibility. And number 3 we have is a 90-day disruption roadmap, a template for planning your next self-cannibalization move you need to make. So I would say here, this is kind of this overall encompassing call to action I have for you off this episode. Don't let your past successes become the tombstone of your future. So download these tools and start your first Sacred Cow audit today. For deeper insights into the architecture of legacy, visit Visionary Files for our full business leadership series. We've got a full master course there on the Visionary brand at thevisionaryfiles.com. It's a master course that we've developed, 18-part 2-hour series of video training on some of the theories that I've talked about here today. So if you're ready to move from theory to true market dominance that I know everybody craves, again, visit thevisionaryfiles.com to access. It's an extended business leadership series and master course. It's over 2 hours, as I mentioned, in-depth video lectures, support material, Q&As on the architecture of building a legacy brand based off the strategies I talk about in the book, The Visionary Brand. And I always ask at the end as well is that this really helps the Visionary Chronicles, and it's really you that make us a success. And if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy of The Visionary Leader or The Visionary Brand. Both complement one another and help you be more successful as a brand, a leader, both personally and professionally. It's available now wherever books are sold. Perfect companion, by the way, if you're looking to reignite your purpose or lead with more clarity in this super complex world. And as a thank you on the Visionary brand, we still have the ebook. That was my most recent release a couple months ago, which is also a #1 Amazon business leadership book, along with the Visionary brand, by the way. So thank you for those that did purchase this. And a thank you for my loyal podcast listeners. We're keeping that ebook at $199. We have now the hardcover, we have the ebook, and we now also have the audio book. So again, as I'd mentioned before, the book is really a culmination of decades of research, experiences, real-world insights into what makes leaders like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Leonardo da Vinci, Socrates, visionary. And how did they achieve that status? So please, if you could, if this episode resonated with you, we have this series so it helps you to be a better visionary leader. So your support means the world, and I genuinely mean that. And your purchase goes a long way into helping us spread the vision even further, and only through you will that happen. So the Visionary Chronicles, where the future is created by those bold enough to shape it. And until next time, keep innovating, keep leading, and keep shaping the future. Thank you for your continued support, as always, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. As I always say, stay true, stay authentic, be different, and be great, but always enjoy the journey along the way.